the world changed here. In a white-hot frenzy of invention, the story of humankind and the story of painting fused. The city of Florence, possibly the most important city in the story of painting, because it was the Renaissance city where Leonardo and Michelangelo and Botticelli lived and worked. Painters who were going to make visible a new sense of what it meant to be human. But if you asked the great artists of the Renaissance where the dynamite of this new vision began to fizz and splutter, they would direct you to a small side chapel in the Carmelite church. They all came here to marvel at the work of a young artist, Masaccio, forever young because he died in his 20s, and the Renaissance begins with him. Adam and Eve, being expelled from paradise, from the bliss of the womb, into the hard, cold light of every day. And Masaccio makes them so totally credible to us, such different people. Adam's so unconscious of his body, but he hides his face. He can't bear the light of truth. Perhaps he doesn't know who he is anymore. And Eve, very aware of her body, though there's actually nobody to see her, but what she exposes is her face, that terrible primal scream that she emits, and her eyes like slits, a newborn baby's look. Or you could say her face is like a skull, because now that they're born, they will die. Everything, really, reverberates through the story from these two images. The beautiful male nakedness of Adam, and the sexuality of Eve, and their immersion in the truth. The angel isn't really driving them out. They're driving themselves out. It's that human guilt. And this, I think, is terribly important, because we can think of the Renaissance as seeing humanity as sort of godlike. No, they saw humanity as dignified, as able to stand up and take responsibility. But they bore the weight of all the grief that mankind had ever known, all the guilts and the fears. They stand on the earth and they cast their own shadows. That's what the Renaissance was about. Humanity as upright, suffering but responsible. Artists need patrons, and the Florentine artists had the good fortune to find enlightened merchants and bankers in their own city. And most important of all was the Medici family. They were bankers. Popes and queens would come from their ranks. But their real contribution to history was the way they spent their money. Cosimo, the first Medici patron, built a brand new monastery for the Dominican brothers, magnificently equipped with a splendid library to house their precious manuscripts. There were to be paintings on every floor and in every cell. And to paint them, Cosimo naturally chose the community's own artist, Brother John. He painted angels with such delicacy and conviction that he was nicknamed Brother Angel, Fra Angelico. This great and glorious painting is by Fra Angelico. And yet, when we see rows of saints and angels, it can seem for some of us rather daunting. However, here is one of the small pictures about Cosmas and Damian that were underneath the big one. And you can see fully the warmth and the wit and the great sophistication of Fra Angelico. It's the story of Justinian, who had a cancerous leg. And one night, he dreamt that who should fly in the window but Cosmas and Damien. And they cut off his leg and replaced it with the leg of a dead Ethiopian. So when he woke up in the morning, he was two-toned but cured. Now, it's a most marvelous little picture. The space is so real. There's the stool, there are the slippers. Notice two slippers. At some level, Justinian clearly expected a miracle. And there's his urinal jar, and there's all these medicines along the top. And here are the saints still bearing the wisps of their coming down from heaven. And they've looped up the curtain so tidily. And they're bending down with their glasses and their intentness, sewing on the black leg.
It's telling a moral, of course, that we should look after our fellow men. And no one could do it with such Renaissance freshness as dear Fra Angelico. The wealthy have always wanted their homes decorated, and the Renaissance found new themes. Here at the Villa Lemmy, the paintings are not religious. No, these were images that the Renaissance scholars were now discovering, the world of mythology, muses, graces. The classical world was highly fashionable, and who more in tune with it than Botticelli? Here are his Mars and Venus, the god of war and the goddess of love.
And the very shape of it, that long, thin shape, tells us that this was part of furniture, either a chest or over a door, but wherever the furniture was, it was bedroom furniture, because this is a portrait of lovers. And you know, Botticelli is so gracious and elegant, almost a garden party sort of painter. We don't often think of him as being humorous, but here he is. Because after their night together, Mars is completely worn out. He doesn't even hear the little satyrs making noises in his ear. Whereas Venus is as cool as a cucumber, not a hair out of place. And of course, since this was mythology, this is showing that love will always be stronger than war and will strip war's armor off. And Botticelli was very conscious of that. But what he wasn't conscious of, I think, was something in himself. Because he was a man who never found a partner, a lonely man. And look at these lovers, how apart they are. There's no oneness at all. You don't feel Mars minds all that much. He's just sunk in almost a brutish slumber. But Venus, for all that brave little smile, don't you think there's just an element of a woman facing loneliness? Mightn't many a Renaissance woman looked at this and felt that was a woman's life? And I think it's all those elements, the wit and the moral commitment which was so profound in Botticelli, and this unconscious understanding of what it meant to be alone, that gives this painting its enormous appeal. By the time of the Renaissance, Mantua had become a peaceful and prosperous city, a splendid center of art and scholarship. Courtly life was glamorous, with pageants and festivities to rival those of ancient Rome. Its ruler, Ludovico Gonzaga, lived amidst beauty, wealth, and learning. Among his retinue was a court painter called Andrea Mantegna. If Mantegna hadn't existed,
I think we would have had to invent him for the story of painting, because he fills so many gaps. He's the only great genius from the north of Italy, so that keeps the balance. And he's the only great painter who worked officially for a court. The lucky court was Mantua, and the lucky family were the Gonzagas. Now, this had its advantages and its disadvantages. Advantage was that he had a steady income, more or less. The disadvantage, of course, was he had to paint the Gonzagas. And as you can see, they were not the most photogenic of families. I could also here kill another bird with the same stone, because in painting them, he shows something that's essential to the Renaissance. Their great interest in sculpture, in the Greek and Roman statues they were digging up. Mantegna, above all, was fascinated by the solidity of the stone. And as you can see, he's got the ugly Gonzaga face, but he's painted them with that majesty, that sense of ordered nobility that goes with sculpture. Now, he does it very well, but I can't help feeling it was a chore, it was a duty. What he did for pleasure was that wonderful landscape behind, that magical city that never was, the Mantua of his imagination. And as you go along, the still more wonderful city over here, those strange, fantastic rock shapes, the weird castles. There was a great longing for freedom and excitement, I think, in Mantegna. And although physically he didn't have it, he lived here all his life. He had it in his imagination. But the even greater wonder of this room is the ceiling. The oculus, the eye, the round center. It's a wonderful piece of painting, open to the sky and all the cherubs round that balcony. But the real charm is something that was private to Mantegna and his great painting, because it all depended upon where you sat, and only the Duke sat over here. Now, his guests came in this way, and he alone knew, sitting here, that up there was a booby trap. And it must have given him great satisfaction to think that all the people he didn't like were in grave danger of having that great tub fall upon their unsuspecting heads.
So much of the Renaissance was about learning to control the world, and central to this was the new science of perspective. It was Masaccio who brought perspective to painting, one of the crucial events in the story. His Trinity is painted on the wall of a great Florentine church, but the skeleton of Adam, the first man, pushes back underneath the ledge. And above it, the crucified Christ hangs in real space, as if in a side chapel. It's hard to believe that it's not real architecture, only paint. The technique was perfected in paintings like this, the ideal city, attributed to Piero della Francesca. Everything in this picture converges on the center, with a vanishing point, as if battering the chaos of the world into harmony. We're drawn into unpeopled streets, and there's an overwhelming illusion of other streets that must lie behind the temple, unseen but present. Piero wrote books on mathematics and optics. In the Renaissance, there was no conflict between science and art in the quest to make sense of the world. But there was a towering genius who moved both disciplines to a different plane, the perfect Renaissance man.
Leonardo, the man from Vinci, born the illegitimate son of a small-town lawyer, he possessed one of the greatest minds of all time. Nothing seems to have escaped his probing genius. The flight of birds, armored vehicles, the circulation of the blood, measuring the winds, helicopters, submarines, astronomy. They all tantalized the fickle brilliance of his imagination.
What are we to make of a man that sends in a job application, listing in detail all his engineering and scientific skills, and adds as a sort of postscript that he also paints a little? And this is what he paints, one of the most famous pictures of all time. We've looked so often at the Mona Lisa, we think we understand it, but we don't. It's infinitely subtle. And yet, unless we really look at it and try to understand it, we'll never understand Leonardo. If you think of it, a great portrait usually is both very beautiful and full of personality. It's a charge field. It takes us into a dynamo of somebody else's personhood. But not the Mona Lisa. We're not reacting to her. She's reacting not to us, but to the artist. Remember, Leonardo was the most beautiful man of his generation. Great singer. When he painted, he usually had musicians there. And we know for certain that he never had an emotional relationship with a woman. Boys, yes, but that was it. So here is this merchant's wife, Mona Lisa, watching with amused interest, with a little secret smile, this beautiful, aristocratic-looking, influential man painting her. She knows exactly what she thinks, and she's not going to share it. And the wonder of Leonardo is that he's caught that. This look, not of sharing her personality, but of looking at him and secretly smiling and keeping herself a mystery. And you can see behind, he's painted that wonderful vista of hills melting into one another, mysterious mountains and rivers, all suggesting, of course, the eternal mystery of womanhood. And she's probably sitting within smelling distance of her kitchen, and she knows that the eternal mystery of womanhood means something quite different to Leonardo than it does to anybody else she knows. And she's enjoying it. And Leonardo has the humility, really, has the genius to share the secret, I won't show you what I'm like, I'll just show you my reaction, personality with us. It deserves to be the greatest painting in the world, or at least the most famous.
Leonardo ushers in the climax of the age, the high Renaissance. The center had moved to Rome, then a rather pitiful city with cows grazing in the Forum. But an ambitious pope found this humiliating. Julius II wanted to restore Rome to its ancient imperial splendor. He started to rebuild the city on a gigantic scale, and in the center, he would build St. Peter's, the largest cathedral in the known world. Julius had an eye for talent, and when it came to painting his own apartments, he chose a young sensation from the provinces, Raphael. He was only 25, and he was clever. All the paintings in this room celebrate the power of the papacy, from Julius right back to the first pope, St. Peter.
St. Peter's been put in prison, and Raphael tells the whole story of how he got free by using light. On this side, you've got the steps leading up to the prison. And notice, by the way, the brilliant way he's accommodated, having to have that great window stuck in his space. And these stairs are the ordinary world. And they've got two sources of light. They've got the moon floating there in the sky, and they've got artificial light, which in his day is the torch. Now, they can see by that light, but it's confused, they're bickering, it's all lacking in clarity. But inside the prison, there's another light. There's an angel made of light and air, radiating an extraordinarily heavenly brightness, which nobody has ever seen, and St. Peter doesn't see it either. His eyes are shut. Like the guards, he's asleep. And in his sleep, he has a dream. He dreams he sees an angel who says he's going to take him out of the prison. And he takes him by the hand, and his chains fall off, and they come to the door, and it flies open. They walk down the stairs, all the guards are asleep, and they walk through the prison, doors opening, sleepy guards, nobody sees them, right out into the city. And then the angel leaves him, and he wakes up, and he's free. It's happened, he's escaped. Now, the great Pope Julius II, the man who built up Rome to be the art capital of the world, he loved this story. He wanted Raphael to paint it, because he thought it showed you can't keep a good pope down. But of course, it's far deeper. It's the escape dream. The dream everybody has when all troubles fall away. No mortgage, perfect partner, dream holiday. And it seems to me so touching that Raphael, who died when he was in his 30s, and who was a golden boy, handsome, popular, successful in all he did, that he too knew this dream. He knew the need to escape.
It all came so easily to Raphael. How unfair this seemed to the dark genius slaving away down the corridor. Michelangelo was of impeccable blue-blooded ancestry. His family were outraged that he chose to work with his hands. But he'd been nursed by a stonemason's wife. He liked nothing better than to get his hands dirty and his overalls stained. Sculpture to him was a fire in the blood. These unfinished figures are called the captives. They were originally intended to adorn the tomb of Julius himself, a monument to rival the mausoleums of antiquity. It would have taken Michelangelo 20 years to complete, but Julius stopped it. He asked him to paint a ceiling. Michelangelo hated painting. He thought he had no gift for it. And this is what he did. The Sistine Chapel, the sheer abundance and physical beauty of what Michelangelo produced has never been surpassed. One might almost say that the entire Renaissance, which is about new life, is summed up in the birth of Adam. Adam sprawls there in his naked male glory, but he's not alive. All he can do is lift up a flaccid finger, and out of the clouds whirls down the god of power. In his great flying cloak, there's a world. Whether that's Eve or not, there's a human face there, looking straight at Adam's, with the eyes daring him to respond to the challenge. And God's finger touches that of man. Adam is so beautiful, but he hasn't got a mind yet. He's not alive. And this mattered intensely to Michelangelo. He thought the height of beauty was the young male body. But it had to be a thinking body. And to drive this home, he's put all round the ceiling what are called the inudi. Scholars have often wondered what they're doing there. What they're doing is making this inescapable, that beauty alone is not enough. You've got to have a spirit. You've got to be thinking. And the whole ceiling tells the story of our adventure through time, which has brought us to where we are now.
When he was in his 70s, another pope badgered Michelangelo into painting for him. But the conversion of St. Paul is very different from the Sistine Chapel. Here, all's in confusion. Christ plummets from the skies, knocks St. Paul off his horse, and he lies there. But it's not the face of the young Paul, it's an old face. The face of the old Michelangelo, and he lies there lost and bewildered. He's outlived the Renaissance, and he knows it. And he's looking with sightless eyes into the mysteries of the new post-Renaissance world.
But there's another chapter to the story of the Renaissance, one which opens in the city of Venice and which has a splendor all its own.